Kyle Whittingham, who was also shedding some tears at his post-game press conference after that game yesterday. He's on the winning side of this. Now, keep in mind here, with Whittingham shedding some tears, this is the last home game of the season at Rice-Eccles, okay? It's going to come into play because he will talk about the seniors. Obviously, senior day. Probably matters more to a place like Utah, more of a developmental program. You got guys who've been program guys, right? If you're at Texas Tech, Texas A&M, where, you may have some more hired guns, perhaps it doesn't have quite the same meaning as it would at Utah. So you can understand why there would potentially be some emotion there. But let's listen to this and then get to some of the analysis of this on, does this mean actually something more than just Kyle Whittingham being a little bit emotional about his seniors?
So happy for our seniors to be able to go out with a win, their last opportunity in Rice-Eccles. Excuse me, when I think about our seniors, I get emotional, so I apologize. But it's just so awesome for them to be able to have that experience.
Okay, shorter, but there was Kyle Whittingham, I'm not a guy that's been watching Kyle Whittingham press conferences for a very long time, so I don't know how often something like this would be happening, but my guess is this doesn't happen very often. This seems like a very stoic guy, about as stoic as they come every single time that I have seen him talk. So I was taken aback a bit by this to see it, and of course I started to wonder, well, hey, I mean, they literally have a head coach in waiting already, right? So like, retirement has been talked about for a couple of years now with Kyle Whittingham. Is there more to this than just he's proud of, not just like, hey, the seniors getting their moment, but like the seniors did that, like on a day where we gave up a school record, a stadium record anyway, in rushing yards to an opponent, on a day when we did that and played so poorly for so long and we're down by 10 with like 3 minutes left and we figured out a way to come back and win that game. Yeah, I could see how, like, you'd be, but I wouldn't think that would move Kyle Whittingham to cry. Then I saw this. I was reading Josh Furlong, which you should all do at KSL. Does a great job covering Utah. And this is what he said in his column about the situation. So he says, he played it off as emotion directed toward outgoing seniors, a plausible fact given this year's roster makeup and his love of his players, but it was difficult not to mistake it for something more. A wild come-from-behind Utah win was likely his last as head coach at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and the emotions overtook him. So that's Josh Furlong's words there. On the beat, a wild come-from-behind Utah win was likely his last as head coach at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and the emotions overtook him. Josh said, no, Whittingham has not made a formal retirement announcement, but the writing was on the wall after an emotional win that left the head coach almost speechless for a moment. I know Josh made note that Whittingham's family was also right there by him at the press conference. I don't know if that's an every time thing or if that was a special thing here. The fact that he made note of it at least had me wondering, okay, maybe that's something else that you're thinking about too when you're taking all this into consideration. So it certainly has, look, I put a lot of faith in what Josh says there. It certainly moves me toward thinking this definitely could be it. If you're Utah, my initial reaction when I think about, okay, like for instance, Dave Aranda just got the vote of confidence. Well, he's sticking around, not more than the vote of confidence. He got, hey, you're going to be back next year. And with all the jobs open, I can understand a school in the Big 12 being like, I don't know that this is the year that we really want to be out searching for a head coach. And so my initial reaction when I hear like, oh, coach that might be leaving, I think, may not be the best time to be out there because there's just going to be so much competition for head coaches right now, right? Lane Kiffin's literally probably about to do like a little hat ceremony thing to pick who he's going to coach. But obviously this one, it doesn't matter. It's like, Utah's got the guy. It's going to be Morgan Scalley. You just keep the cohesiveness and roll on there. I'm sure that produces some anxieties for Utah fans, even if you are confident in Morgan Scalley. There's always going to be some anxiety with losing a legend. But yeah, this moved me much more into the camp of being like, all right, this needs to be on the radar. I don't think Utah is going to make the college football playoff. More on that in a moment. It's definitely less likely after their performance on Saturday. I think they're probably going to move down a spot or two in the college football playoff rankings. However, if that's it, that is a pretty fitting way for him to go out. Like a performance certainly befitting of what I think Kyle Whittingham's legacy is going to be at Utah, man. That's a program that fights. That's a program that grinds. It is a program that stops the run. So I get that, that piece of it doesn't totally fit the narrative. But to have a come from behind win where the team just didn't give up, and Devin Dampier on a night when he is really struggling to throw the ball, his accuracy is not great. He throws a dart on 3rd and 22 that helps set up an eventual touchdown, which was also a beautiful throw into the corner of the end zone, and then has the 4th and 1 run that he takes nearly in for a touchdown, right? Like all these things that happen, very emblematic of like the toughness and never say die sort of attitude that you would expect from Kyle Whittingham's program. So thinking about that, if you're sitting here thinking about that, like, oh man, 1, just this is it in general, and 2, like this is it and it ended like that. Yeah, I can definitely see how you'd be getting caught up in the emotions of that. You also, if you're Kyle Whittingham and the fans, then you got to see Rice-Eccles kind of at peak Rice-Eccles by the end of the game. I know he commented on just how loud it was, and it sounded crazy loud on TV. I saw people tweeting about like national college football peeps tweeting about how you could see the camera shaking and stuff. Like it was very apparent how intense and great that atmosphere was by the end of the game, which also seems really appropriate. The stadium gets to, perhaps end that relationship with Kyle Whittingham by being at total peaking it out at 10, right? At 11, whatever you want to say about the stadium and where it was at. So if that's it, it's a cool way to go out. And I would even tie this together with the Chris Kleiman segment that I just did there about where he's at and feeling, I think, disrespected by people that are like, hey, we got to go get Colin Klein. We can't, Kleiman's over the hill. Kleiman's done here. Kyle Whittingham had a couple of rough years, one of which was definitely really affected by injuries. Now, K-State didn't have the quarterback injuries, certainly that Utah had, and I am not. I can hear my Three-Maw co-host Cole Manbeck right now in my ear, like, don't use injuries as an excuse for this year. I mean, I'm not. But it is something that happened in the back half of the season that made it a little bit tougher on this team. After a couple of rough years, Kyle Whittingham came back, got the right guys in the portal. Obviously, there was patience with him. No one was going to run Kyle Whittingham out of there. And even if the fans may have been grumbling about some of that, they came back and had a near playoff season this year where they're probably going to go 10-2, assuming that they win at Kansas. Alan, I'm sure Alan's going to pop by and tell me I'm wrong about that later in this show. Okay. But they're probably going to go 10-2 after all of that. So that can be a little roadmap, perhaps, for K-State fans who are here. And maybe I'm even talking to myself right now and thinking, I don't know that Chris Kleiman has it in him to get this back up and going. I think it's going to be an off season where K-State, for the first time in like 4 years, is not going to have much in the way of expectations at all, which can be good. And I think some of that probably true for Utah too. A place that had, they had won back-to-back Pac-12 titles. They come into the Big 12. They're the preseason favorite. Then it's like, yeah, there was some buzz like, hey, Utah could be a surprise college football playoff team this year and really make a push, but not a ton of that, and got to sort of lay low and then just sneak up on everybody this year, put together a really nice season and a really nice performance throughout the year. So anyway, some thoughts on very emotional coach press conferences after that game. There was a lot going on in that game. I would have never, ever, ever dreamed going into that game that I would spend as much time talking about it, that I'd be doing the post game live the way that I was, and then coming back on here to double up and talk about it because of everything that happened with that. But that's sort of the beauty of college football, games that you don't think are going to be like that, games that you do not think are going to have any kind of emotional pull like that, they do, and they turn wild and crazy. So I would say that I appreciate that aspect of what happened on Saturday between K-State and Utah for sure.